So this is techniques and tools for integrating sustainability in the classroom and beyond. I'm excited to introduce our 4 panelists today.
Okay, so I'm Maggie Schoonover. I'm an assistant educator and director of sustainable innovation with the College of Innovation and Design at Wichita State University. I have many different hats that I wear. So I'm agile product management and sustainability faculty. I teach software development with Scrum. Also teach an applied sustainability class. I manage our very new interdisciplinary minor in sustainability. And then we also do quite a bit of project-based learning, like student research experiences, trying to have that experiential learning aspect of things, so outside the classroom as well. And then also, generally, I think all of us in the college are just kind of advocates for innovation and design thinking and agile product management to other departments across campus to try to get more collaboration and students to have more of these like job-ready skills that a lot of us are talking about here.
Okay, Carly.
So I'm Carly Bishop. I've been in Agnes Scott for about 4 years. I got hired to help develop master's degree programs at Agnes Scott. Coming from Georgia Tech, though, with an systems engineering background, and have been able to really apply some of those ideas. Nell and I were just talking this morning, and it's kind of like, so this is the way one of the faculty at Agnes Scott mentioned, it's kind of like teaching this stuff is like feeding a dog a pill, right? You put it in the cheese and they don't know they're getting it. And we do these amazing things with design thinking, creative problem solving, human-centered design. So we've been having a lot of fun with that. And the students are embracing it, which is really neat. So thank you.
Okay, that's me. So I'm Nell Ruby, and I teach at Agnes Scott too. Agnes Scott is a small women's liberal arts college in Atlanta. We have 1,000 undergraduate students, so it's very small, and I don't know how many graduates. The graduate program, a couple of hundred, is really new, and it's part of our, task to save ourselves. It's working out really well because it brings in people like Carly, who's in physics, and I am in art. It's been, when I found Carly, it was like, thank goodness. And she's in the graduate program, and she's in science, and I'm in art, and I'm in the undergraduate, but feathers find each other, right? So I have been there for 30 years. It's a long dang time, but I have a background in starting out in architecture and then going into graphic design and then going into multimedia art, which is what I am now. I teach art at Agnes Scott. Again, a small college, so there's so much room for changing and moving and doing things. And so I have this interest in social engagement in all of those things. And I think that's what brings me to sustainability, is like the idea of large thinking about how we can really own and design our future.
I'm Isaac Wanasika. I'm chair of management department at the Montfort College of Business, University of Northern Colorado. I'm primarily involved in the development of the entrepreneurship curriculum. I've extended this to all students in the College of Business and beyond, all the 14,000, as well as sustainable innovation. Right now, we are in the process of developing a workforce development program for innovation for the Northern Colorado area. So I'm the founder and facilitator for Northern Colorado Innovation Hub, and I'm glad to be here.
All right, thank you all. So to kind of get started, the first question is, and just FYI, we're going to bake some time in at the second half of the session for audience Q&A. So if you have questions, we'll have some time for you all to ask the panelists some questions. But yeah, can each of you give a brief explanation of how you approach the arc of the student experience in your course or program, and how you go about engaging students with sustainability concepts? And Maggie, I'll ask you to kind of kick us off with that.
Sure. So in conjunction with our interdisciplinary minor in sustainability, we wanted, that minor was actually put together by faculty across campus, and so the idea was we wanted any student from any degree to have an opportunity to do sustainability like, kind of on their track, but because it's interdisciplinary, you also need the opportunity to take other classes from other departments. So because that minor now sits with the College of Innovation and Design, they trusted us to keep it interdisciplinary, and then we added an exit course called Applied Sustainability and Innovation. We've kind of thought of as more of an in-practice opportunity for those students that coming from their different sustainability tracks, and so we have a lot of like mechanical engineering students, and then some liberal arts students, but mostly engineering and science students, like biology, geology, all that stuff, to come in and then actually have to do the interdisciplinary part. So that course is very much a holistic approach to sustainability, and so how do we bring all these things together and then add some quantify the value. So if you guys are familiar with students, especially from more traditional pathways through sustainability, I myself was more my background is natural sciences, like meteorology, climate change, so we have one view of sustainability and that's the correct view. Right? So trying to get our students to learn from each other was how I designed that class, and also my understanding of sustainability has obviously evolved over the years, and so we felt no one was really talking about it from a business perspective, at least on our campus, and how do you quantify the value of these conversations? Why is sustainability important monetarily? And then trying to get these students to have that conversation, so we curated more connecting all the dots is what that class is about, while also providing hands-on sustainability experiences for these students, and then wanting them to be able to create a portfolio piece. So at the end of the class, they have to actually write a sustainability proposal and pitch it back to whatever industry partner we have that semester. And so fortunately, some of the biggest feedback that we get is we always get a lot of positive feedback on collaborating with other students outside of our degree. That's always the main theme, and that's good because that's kind of how we designed that class.
Then I'm going to ask Carly and Nell to share a little bit about what they're doing.
Yeah, so at Agnes Scott, so again, I came in to direct one of the master's degree programs, and one of the courses that we brought in was human-centered design and implementation. And so to bring in the IDEO concepts and then really focus on, you can see the IDEO or the sprints, right? Inspiration, ideation, and implementation. But then we put a little bit more structure around that with the design thinking, specific design thinking tools, processes, and approaches. So we started that in a master's degree program, initially looking at aging in place, right? Because that was of interest to me. But then we had this opportunity to get one of the faculty grants through VentureWell. And when we looked at that, we thought, what can we do now with this human-centered design course and really start focusing on sustainability? And so what we did was we turned it into sustainable agriculture. So the umbrella of research that we were doing in that particular course was on sustainable agriculture, and it fits so well into all of this human-centered design because you're looking at food deserts and those kinds of things that we can help support through sustainable agriculture. And then Nell and I got an opportunity to work together now that we're trying to bring this now just out of specifically graduate students now into the undergrads. And I'll let you talk to that.
Yeah, so I, just by nature's, I'm really interested in design and I'm really interested in thinking, right? So, I'm an artist, and what artists do is respond to my culture. And so I'm interested in, what ideas are happening, what is going on, who are we? It's sort of the nature of person, right? And the nature of person right now is in crisis. I mean, I'm scared, right? I'm scared for what happens next. So I've been involved with this for some time, not design thinking in particular, but the idea, right? So, I can tell you all the things that we've done with sustainability within my coursework, but I think more interestingly is last summer, we started a makerspace, and it started by just casting. I just cast out over the summer. I said, is anybody interested in this kind of an idea? Students, right? And can help me over the summer. And so that's how it started. So it started with attraction, not promotion. And that's because I went to my our student engagement leader, and I said, I'm thinking about doing this. And she said, don't just make something, ask what they want. Don't just deliver something that we think they want, but ask what is needed. And that was so smart because the students are magnificently engaged. So let's see, what did I want to say more about that? The makerspace is an open space. It is not class-based. There's nothing. It's just an open space by invitation. I taught what's called an LDR class, a leadership class, which is hysterical because I don't know anything about that. And they person the space. So their task, their class hours, their credit hours are partially to be stewards of the space. And so they invented all of the things that we needed to have. It started out basically with knitting, and I am really feminist about this because I'm like, well, actually sewing and knitting are engineering, right? And that's how you think through those kinds of dimensional projects. And we don't credit that, do we? I mean, it's a women's college, so I'm really interested in empowerment, right? So power tools, access. We're a women's college that also has a very diverse population. There's no one ethnic majority in the undergraduate. It's a really interesting kind of alternative. It has a legacy of being a historically white college, and now it's not at all. So people choose to come here over Spelman because they want an experience that is more diverse. It's a very interesting demographic. But women traditionally are expected not to have the kind of skills that I think empower us, right? I know how to use a power tool and it makes me feel like I can do anything. It's kind of like having a baby. So again, this idea of just pulling into your larger thought, the idea of permission and access and thinking. How do we think through this? And our motto, what is it called? Our college, it's not our alma mater, but our what do you say, that the slogan, what is it? Mission. The mission of the college is to teach women the intellectual and social engagements challenges, social and intellectual challenges of our time. And it's something I can just ingest. I mean, that's what I want to do. I want to empower people, especially women and women of color. And so giving access, and creating these places where they can happen is really important to me. And the makerspace has become this invitational community. I can't even believe how successful it is. People just come and they hang out, and we made it into this space, and one of the students sketched the design and we made it happen. And there's a playlist, and so the idea of so there's 3D printers and there's large printers and there's knitting and sewing, and we don't have the funding yet, but we will get it to do a fab lab that has to be in another space. But the idea of having the adjacents of physics people and art people doing really different projects, right? So somebody is printing out, actually, I don't even know what it is. It's a physics formula. They're making it into this real object next to somebody who's doing embroidery of something else that has a concept, and they're looking at each other and they're meeting each other and they're talking about ideas. So the social sustainability of that and why we're all together, I think, is the most magnificent project. Like, how do you teach holistic thinking in the age so that we really generate the idea and the powers within the system as these students graduate and go out and make more things happen?
Thank you, Neil. Isaac, did you want to share a little bit too about? You're good on this one? Okay. All right, so next question here. Okay, so within sustainability education, many people talk about the importance of integrating interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approaches. Why is this so important, Maggie? If we can hear from you first.
So I alluded to this earlier, but it's important because sustainability is an interdisciplinary issue. So you talk about the social sustainability, and I think a lot of us are familiar maybe with the triple bottom lines. You have economic, environmental, and social. And even that is not really, it encompasses everything. And I think when we get in our silos, we tend to think of it a very specific way, and it's not until we start discussing across silos that we can learn from other people. So in my class we use, I found this in a paper, it's the business model canvas for sustainability. And so it's basically the business model canvas, but you do it 3 times over. And so you do it once for each of those bottom lines. So you do an environmental, social, and economic version of that. And depending on what students I have in the class, that can be really interesting conversations. So when I have a business student, they're real quick with the economic stuff. But then I can have a human factors psychology student sitting next to them, and they're all about the social side. And then I can have an engineering student, and they're all about the environment side. And so when we can actually kind of overlay all those different perspectives, then we have a much more holistic viewpoint of that issue. And then the solutions that they come up with, then I think, are much better. Like, they're much more valuable, they're much more well thought out. And because they have to then not only take that kind of conversation and then they have to pitch it back to the industry stakeholder and explain, this is why you should spend money on this, or this is why it's costing you a lot of money not to consider this. It's a very different conversation than, at least like what I'm used to, which is a lot of the doomsday stuff about climate change. I mean, that's all also important, but I think one of the, maybe not failures, but one of the challenges that a lot of more traditional scientists have is storytelling. Like, we're not very good at explaining why this is important. And so when we can learn from other people who's maybe they do have that skill set, at least for me, it's a relief to know that I don't necessarily have to be good at all of those things. I can understand my part, and if I can talk to somebody else well enough and we can collaborate, then together we're much more effective. And sustainability is one of those issues where nobody can solve it independently. We have to work together to do that. And so demonstrating that for students in real time in the classroom, that's what I'm trying. That's what I try to do in all my classes. And so rather than me telling them why it's important to be interdisciplinary, they get to experience why it's important.
So on that note, and Carly, Nell, if you want to tag team this one, while an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approach is ideal, it's oftentimes difficult to successfully implement. Can you all talk a little bit about some ideas that have worked out and also some that haven't?
So it's interesting. When we first got our graduate program up and running, we had students kind of from across the board. You know, some of them had some science background, but a lot of them did not. And so we were trying to bring them into a multidisciplinary space that they could explore. And the human-centered design course was a good course to do that with, and let the students kind of explore. We would give them kind of guide rails and stuff, and it was interesting. One of the students, which I love this quote, she said, "I had to trust the process. I had to trust the process because it was basically," and you've heard the analogy, we're building the bike while we're riding it, right? And that's what they were doing as they went through this design thinking process and the human-centered design. So bringing all of those different kind of backgrounds together into a graduate program that some of the students had been out of school for a number of years. We had a very diverse, even age population, and really getting them focused on the projects, I think, is an amazing way to bring that together. So the project-based aspects of what we are doing every day at Agnes Scott, it really does make that all happen. And it kind of happens naturally because you need these different resources to come in to support your project. So project-based learning, which you all know, I mean, you're here at VentureWell, that's why you're doing all of this stuff, you know this experiential learning, but the project bases really, really help us focus that.
You know, I'm going to go back to design thinking and just thinking about the idea of making a prototype, and at the makerspace where you actually make a tangible object. And what has happened in the makerspace has made me move myself away from art, right? As soon as you say art, everyone's like, oh no, I'm not an artist, and they've got it in a category, and there's no way I mean, that's just not it. I'm not an artist, but I am a maker, right? And as soon as you get in there and you do something very low stakes, like learn to crochet, you know how exciting it is to learn. Well, that happens, again, as the students start to make, and they start to ingest, I think, by pleasure, the joy of getting into a practice of making. And that is not about cynicism and being removed and looking at all the information and passively absorbing the fact that, oh my God, we're all going to die. You know, it's more about, hey, I'm here right now, I can make something, and look how that connects to everything. So that idea of the product as, you know, or just a thing, a tangible thing, as a way to motivate and propel. And, you know, one of the things that we're playing with, calling it a makerspace, we still haven't come up with the name right now. It's Seesaw. I can't remember it's an acronym, but it's supposed to connote playfulness. But we talked about calling it a risk lab, right? So that you come in, there's no stakes. It's not just low stakes, there's no stakes, right? So you come in and you can do whatever you want. And that is a way to be vulnerable and do stuff and not care, but also then start to care. Like, it's kind of a trick. The other thing I was going to say is our next move is to try to get modules made. That's one of the projects of one of Carly's students, that, you know, in our learning management program in Canvas, to make a module so that there are 2-week modules where any discipline can pick that up and, for example, come into the makerspace and make something. And I've already talked to John Pilger, who's a not John Pilger, Doug Fonts, who is a chemist. And he said, you know, we have a perfect thing for that, and it's something about valent and covalent bonds and how things work, and you can give these students, you know, 2 weeks of making some kind of a prototype about how that works. I mean, it could be Velcro and whatever, or it could be, you know, printed, or however they want to do it. So you give them that choice, and you give them that opportunity and the lab, and then they can get excited about, again, that idea of making and how it can come to fruition. The environment in that space is what I try to get in every art classroom, that idea of feeling safe and feeling inventive. And again, the word of art is really harsh on that. Like, people can't quite do that, but they can with making. So that's been really helpful.
Awesome, thank you. So Maggie, you help facilitate an interdisciplinary minor in sustainability. In terms of those students pursuing that major, from which major are most of these students coming from? And on the other side of the coin, which majors are underrepresented, and what's being done to engage those students?
So it's mainly engineering students for us currently, and then a fair amount of kind of natural sciences students as well. Our engineering students are already encouraged to get minors, and then the environmental science students are usually like a class away from the sustainability minor anyway. So that's what our current population is for the minor. On the other side of things, that it's honestly very hard to explain to more like a liberal arts student or a business student, at least on our campus, like why they should care about sustainability. A lot of the students come in, they either already care about it or they really don't. And so what we are trying to do is, but kind of by rights of this, at least my exit course, the in practice course, is showing them why these other disciplines are important. And so it's a little bit by word of mouth right now. But I, like, for example, just talked to an honors student who wants to do what we have, like an honors baccalaureate degree where they can create their own degree if they can't find, you know, exactly what they wanted. And she's trying to combine dance, I think like geology and sustainability. And that's the degree that she wants. And I was like, that sounds awesome. And, you know, and like, you tell me more about like why, yeah, yeah. It's like, what, you know, what's that inspiration for you? Because I want to learn from her. And she's just like, I don't know, it just sounded like those are things I care about, and that just sounds cool. It's like, all right, like that's great. And so like trying to just be more, I don't know, like we find ourselves, at least in our college, being more like the therapist role. Like students come and they get to just kind of talk to us, and in more traditional classes or more traditional departments, there's a plan, and you follow the degree plan, and you don't deviate, because otherwise, you know, the world will end. But giving these students an opportunity to come and just kind of talk about what their interests are and say, that sounds awesome, we need people like that, like you should do that. Like there's no reason you should not do that. Like you will find what your role is in the world. And kind of that's more of our like kind of grassroots approach. There's not currently a mechanism to do that more broadly on campus. So I don't have a very succinct answer for you, but yeah, it's an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's just the reality of the work that you all are trying to do. It's going to be messy, and there's no real blueprint for it, right? And yeah. Sure.
I just want to augment on what Maggie just said, which is the idea really of us being the elders giving permission. You know, I mean, I think what happens with the students is they're like, maybe this, I don't know, you know, and you're like, yeah, why not? I mean, that's how I teach. I really, all I do is give permission. Like, yeah, sounds like a good idea. Let's look it up. I don't know anything about it. You teach me. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll shift gears a little bit. Isaac, I know you're doing some work around designing and developing a course in sustainable innovation with measurable goals and embedding immersive learning, instructional practices, and sustainable environmental practices. Can you talk a little bit about the measurable goals and impact metrics that you track? What numbers are you looking at? How do you gather that data? How do you use that information to evaluate things and inform future decisions?
Okay, that's a long question. So, so one of the things we did when we developed the program was to make it accessible to all students, not exclusive. So I was able to get the trustees to open it up to all students in the university, and then that then gave us access to diverse set of students. Um, and some of the measures that we are looking at, for example, include the proportion of enrollments of underrepresented students in the university. We are looking at how the underrepresented students are completing the program. We are looking at the completion rates. We are also looking at funding because we provide some seed money through pitch competition. We are looking at how much of those funds are going to each of the student categories, including the underrepresented students. We are looking at the proportion of sustainable ventures that end up being commercialized. And then we track these on a yearly basis. So those are some of the things we are implementing, but we're also thinking of others, such as social media impact and so on as we move ahead.
Yeah, Isaac, just want to stick with you for 1 second. So you were talking a little bit about underrepresented students. What advice do you have on how we can increase the amount of underrepresented students in sustainability courses and programs?
Well, the first one is the one I mentioned, provide access to these programs to as many students as possible. So if the program is available to all students rather than just business, then you have that catchment. The other is to identify diverse mentors that are relatable to these students. We're also reaching out to student organizations for underrepresented students in the university, and literally going out and talking to them and telling them about the program and incentivizing them to enroll into the program. We also work with the city of Greeley in northern Colorado, and they have helped us to link up with organizations from minority groups that are able to provide support, such as internship to these students.
Awesome, thank you. Maggie, in the course that you run, students work on a project to meet a real business need with a sustainable solution, and each semester a new industry partner is identified for the project. Can you share a little bit about how you go about finding these industry partners? I know a lot of people are trying to do more university industry collaborations.
Sure. So I've taught the class twice. So this last fall was the second time. The first time around, I kind of pitched it to my colleagues in the college. Like, I want to do an industry partnership, but I honestly don't know anyone local that would want to kind of do this. And they actually recommended that we work with Chartwell. So Chartwell's manages all of our dining services on campus, and like our dean was like, well, they've done some stuff before. They'd probably be open to it. So that's how that partnership got started. And we did a series on food waste with them, and they let us come back and tour and see how they do their inventory and stuff. It was a really excellent partnership, and it was nice kind of for getting our feet wet and kind of seeing if this worked with the format of the class. And then when the students pitched back, we got really positive feedback from Chartwells. They said that it was actually it was more effective, like more valuable, more what's the word? Practical. I think practical solutions or suggestions of things that they could actually do versus some of the other collaborations they'd done, and they actually did take some of the suggestions and implement them, which was really cool. And then the partnership we had this last fall was with Midwest Dairy, and that one was random. I actually got an email, a cold email from their outreach coordinator for our region, and she was just going down the list of anyone with sustainability next to their title. She was just going to email them. And I originally ignored it because you get a lot of these junk emails, and then I thought, you know what, that's actually, if she's for real, like, this is a good tactic, and so I should maybe email her back. And that's actually turned into an excellent partnership for us. So not only did we have that project, we got to go tour a dairy farm within an hour of campus. They brought additional farmers from their board to the pitchback, which was really cool. So they had people coming in. So we're in Wichita, Kansas. We're in like South Central Kansas. We had people from Western Kansas and Kansas City coming down. This is a tiny class. I have like 10 students in this class, and they came down for the pitchback. And then afterwards, like, we want to keep partnering. Like, you can just keep using us for like future semesters. And now that's turned into invitations to do other panel discussions with some of their stakeholders. They have resources. They have like an innovation lab. I mean, obviously we're an agricultural state, and so that works really well. That was very random, like just kind of a serendipitous kind of connection. And then one of the other farmers that came in for the pitchback, he actually runs his own recycling operation in Western Kansas. So now that's kind of got my wheels turning for like, so next fall maybe we do recycling instead of specifically a dairy farm. But yeah, it's random. But like, I was hopeful, and this is what's happened. Like, once you kind of get that ball rolling, it goes naturally.
Can I say something about that? I just want to add to that, because that's how everything, I think, really works when it works. And you guys actually probably already know this, but once you start something and then just be in the habit of noticing, well, here's an implication there, and follow that up. And it's all about kind of following up and making that relationship. And then, you happen to answer the email from a dairy farm. I mean, that's staying in that moment and finding what looks kind of might be intriguing and might lead somewhere. So that kind of what if mentality.
So Carly, now you spoke a little bit about this, but want to give you the proper space to really share your thoughts on this. But yeah, can you speak to why you chose to center your approach around a makerspace? Why did you decide to go that route? What are the benefits of having and using a makerspace in terms of engaging the campus community with sustainability?
Yeah, so this, again, this all started kind of with these projects that we were working through our human-centered design. We had partnered with our Decatur makerspace, so it's our local city makerspace, and with moderate success. Unfortunately, we kind of tried to set up those relationships during COVID. It was really hard, so we were doing some of it remotely, and just to access to that makerspace during that time was a little bit difficult. But it was really focused on 1 or 2 classes at the graduate level. And when the initiative to start the Agnes Scott Makerspace opened up, I thought this is an amazing opportunity for us to now not only focus on a handful of graduate students, now we can reach out across campus and not only engage graduate students, but undergrad students and faculty alike. And as we started exploring that and really put the sustainability piece to it and said, we really want to bring this design thinking into the makerspace with a focus on sustainability, we had faculty coming out of the woodwork, really engaged. I think we had, and we've got a small campus. I mean, it's a very small campus, and we had probably a dozen faculty members say, "Hey, I want to be part of this. I want to help you kind of put these ideas together, and how can we use the makerspace? How can we set it up so students can hit the ground running with design thinking and immediately apply those to this sustainability?" So that's kind of how we started it. But what was interesting, I know we've got a couple of the folks from the mentoring panel here that are here. It just got me thinking about how now we should start bringing in mentors into the makerspace as well, and that'll be one of the next focuses that we'll do. Yes.
And that corroborates with what I was just in, which was what was the one down the hall? What was it about? It was about entrepreneurship. And it was really that idea of bringing in people and bringing in the the community as members and mentors that I think would be really helpful.
So Agnes Scott is a women's college that aims to create a women's-centered learning environment. Historically, makerspaces are often populated by predominantly male students. From your experience, are there advantages to working exclusively with women in a makerspace environment?
Yeah. So between the ages of 17 and 21 is really where you create your identity. Like that's your grown-upness, and it's study after study after study, as I'm sure all of you know, that women don't step up and raise their hand and have the answer, and they sort of step. We just have a culture that really doesn't really like women, and so there's just a general disempowerment. And again, that idea of expectation in our culture, what skills we expect you to have. So in a women's environment, you don't have, I'll say competition, but really what I mean is you don't have that oppression. You have an ability to, in fact, you have to star. You have to step up because there's nobody else who's going to step up for you. Actually, just yesterday, I was listening to a talk by one of our superstars, an art student who was giving a talk in New York at the Institute, and she said, and she went to Yale, and then she didn't diss Agnes Scott, but I had to ask a question about it, and she said, it was Agnes Scott that let me find my voice. So what happens is you come in and you are given all of these real questions, and you have to step in and step up. So the women's college environment, and actually it's no longer a women's college, it is a non-binary inclusive college. And actually it has the most inclusive acceptance policy for what constitutes a woman in the country. I think I'm really proud of that. Right. So was that your question? I can't remember now.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to try to be really practical here. I sat in on a sustainability-focused curriculum development workshop earlier this year, and many staff and faculty members, they want to do more around sustainability, but they had a lot of questions around how and where to find funding for these sustainability initiatives. So can a couple of you share about the financial side of things and some successes on how you've navigated obstacles related to budget? Isaac, I know you had something to say about this one.
Yes, the first one is internal. The first thing I did was to understand the budgeting process and who makes decisions on the budget. And once I did that, I was able to literally follow up for 3 years with the individuals until they just wanted to get rid of me, so they provided the funding. The other area is I thought about getting the resources rather than the funds. And we have a Performing and Visual Arts College that has about 5,000 feet of design laboratories with all the equipment that we needed for innovation. And the dean has allowed us to utilize that space for the innovation classes. I've also worked with the library district, which has a makerspace, and we are collaborating. We are providing student interns to run the space, but they are also giving us access to that place for our classes. The other areas, obviously the foundations and everything, I discovered the state government is very much interested in funding these programs, especially when they relate to workforce development. So those are some of the areas that I can think about right now.
I'm one of those faculty with that question, but for being so close to Colorado, a lot of Colorado's progressivism in that regard has not rubbed off on my state. So it was actually quite a big step to even fund my position to manage the minor in sustainability. And we otherwise don't have a central office of sustainability or anything on our campus. So we're, as a campus, looking for that source of funding as well. One thing that me and my colleagues at our college have kind of toyed with is the idea of finding sponsors. So a lot of industry, they are very much interested in this kind of conversation. They want to see that students in universities are learning this before they get to employment. And so we're experimenting with the concept of having an industry partner sponsor a class so that we have opportunities to do more engaging kind of field trips or at least this class that I teach is very equipment light. I don't need anything more than paper and pencils, but the field trips and the experience is what costs a lot of money. So we're trying to find external sources for that funding.
Yeah, and then just very quickly. So I mentioned that we got a faculty grant at Agnes Scott to actually get some of this kicked off in terms of courses and training and education kinds of things. We do have a Center for Sustainability, which is part of the Agnes Scott culture, so it's kind of nice because we can connect with that. The other thing that is really nice is one of our graduate students went out and got a fairly large grant to start their own business. Basically, it's called Georgia's Sustainable Futures. And we've been able to connect with them pretty regularly to either have students or graduates come in and do internships with them so that they can learn those things. So again, it's the network that can help you. Sometimes it can be a little challenging to get the funds that you need to make things work, but if you just keep searching and looking for those opportunities to network and connect and collaborate, that can be helpful.
Okay, well, I wanted to bake enough time in on the back half for you all to ask questions. So, yeah, are there any questions from the audience? Sure. Carrie? Okay.
I probably don't need this. I'm usually pretty loud, but this is really interesting. My question is for Nell and Carly about your makerspace at West Virginia University. We have almost, it sounds like identical to what you're doing. The challenge we have is every time we get new equipment or tools or upgrades, we don't always have someone who knows how to use it or how to teach others to use it. How do you go about that?
You know, we're brand new. We're brand new. So we're actually still trying to get equipment. And right now, basically what it is people who come in and are attracted to it, we're trying to do programming so that, you know, we just send out a text that says, hey, we're gonna be teaching about the software for the 3D printer tonight. So if you want to use the 3D printer, come talk to Danny, right? So Danny's not in the class, he's not associated, he's just a guy who's really a gal guy who's really interested in 3D printing and really got to know the machine. So our intention is that it becomes community sourced, and so that the people who have the expertise or the interest will come in, learn the stuff, and then teach the stuff. But once we get into the Fab Lab, which I have in my intentions, is we'll have to have a woodchuck, somebody who's there, who keeps it safe, and who can teach. So that's just got to be part of our planning. And right now, I don't have an answer for you. I just have a plan.
One of the other things that we're doing, so I've got a graduate student now who's doing a directed research using design thinking to build design thinking modules for the makerspace. And one of the things we are building in is a space for these educational videos, right? So Nell's students are going to put these videos together. Hey, I know how to do this. I'm going to put a video together. Now, as long as, we're not taking digits off, right? Then you can be a little bit looser about the kind of training. We're probably also going to follow the model for our Decatur makerspace, which is our community makerspace. And they have training sessions and those kinds of things. And if we can get a partnership with them so that they can help us with some of that training, that's another way to go, because they have been a great partner advising us on the things that need to be in the makerspace and then help us with some of that training as well.
And the idea of our stewards can then, instead of having to know everything, which is of course what I wanted them to do, right, would be able to know that people know enough to use the machine, so they can be sort of, certified on the particular machine.
Does anyone else have any questions?
So thanks. This was a great talk. I really enjoyed it. Carly, I think earlier you said that giving this information to students was like putting a pill in a cheese for dogs, and that has not been my experience at all. My students are demanding information on sustainability. They prioritize that. My administration is supportive of that for the most part, but some professors need the pill and the cheese to get them to come along. And you talked a bit about human-centered design. One of the most exciting things that I've seen recently is Don Norman now embracing humanitarian-centered design, which prioritizes the environment and society as much as users in design development. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where that goes. And kind of based on that is my question about the business aspects of sustainability. We've talked about this, and we've talked about, okay, we've got a business canvas that I can use for sustainability, for financial, and for environmental decisions. So I'll pose this question. I've done my canvas all 3 times, and I can either make all 3 companies or proposals are the same, other than I can make an additional $1 million, I can reduce carbon output by 1,000 tons, or I can create 5 entry-level jobs. How do I do that calculation?
Just get the $1 million.
So that's exactly the response that my students will have, because they'll say, I can't really understand the environmental aspect of things. And when I ask them to do an analysis without really the tools to do a life cycle and assessment or analysis, they will come up with a song and dance. And when I ask them to do a social analysis without the tools to do so, they will come up with a song and dance about a song and dance. It's very vague, very loose, and they express caring, which I appreciate, but they have no quantification or tools to quantify things. And we need to make design decisions based on quantification of impact. And we need to figure out what that looks like. And I think right now we have a very difficult time translating from dollars to anything else. And the default seems to be to actually, I know you're joking, but it's to prioritize the dollars because we know what that means. But the impact is harder to understand when I'm talking about a job for somebody or environmental impact in terms of carbon or ocean acidification or resource depletion.
So that's why I have industry partners come back at the end of the semester, and then the students have to do the song and dance for them. And they don't like song and dance. And so they get feedback from what is essentially a potential employer as to like, yeah, no, I've heard that before, you're incorrect. And that's a very jarring experience for the students. They are not used to that, whereas those of us that have been in industry are very used to that. And so that's part of the learning outcome for that class. And I can tell them all semester, like, this has to be feasible. Like, don't make it up. Like, it's okay if at the end of your research you realize that this is not a feasible solution, because telling an industry partner, like, I've done this, I've looked into it a little bit, and this probably won't work for you, and this is why, is just as valuable as a potential solution. Students don't know that. They're used to needing to find the right answer. And so, like, this opportunity to fail, right, or like, and find like negative solutions as well is part of that. And like even this last semester with Midwest Dairy, we had a student group have like, they were super excited about this idea. They had found a company that will take, so we did silage bags and recycling. So it's basically plastic bags that you store grain in. What do you do with the plastic waste afterwards? And so they were pretty excited. They are like, oh, we found a company that recycles it for you. And so all you have to do is fill up this garbage bin, and they'll come and they'll pick it up, and everything's rosy and great. And the panel was like, actually, they only do that when the price of oil is a certain price, because otherwise it's more cost effective to make new plastic. So what about that? And the students were like, oh, well, didn't think about that. And so they tried to go into the song and dance part, and they were just like, no, it's okay. Like, all you've done is validate that we haven't missed anything. And that was still very valuable for the stakeholders. But yeah, that's why we try to have that closed loop and have them have that experience sooner, like while they're in class, so that when they go out into industry, they're getting that mindset better.
I really appreciate the question. And I think, the idea, like, you get a grant, you have to spend it in a year, and all kinds of waste, right? That's what happens. And I'm really curious, Gordon, how you think about that, because obviously you have put some thought into this, and I'm thinking this could be a class, right?
Oh yeah, it could be a class. Yeah, I have thought about it. I don't have good answers. So my song and dance gets a little bit less song and dancey as I get to some of these things than the students have, but I still don't have solid answers. What I can do for them is pose solid questions. So I can say, I want you to design me a tie rod, and I want it to be lightweight and environmentally sustainable. And they will charge off and design that, and I'll say, pick from these 8 materials. And they come back and say, the lightweight one isn't the most environmentally sustainable one. Which do I prioritize? And I say, welcome to the world of being a designer. And you have to decide. And what they do then is say, Well, I don't know how to decide. So they'll either come up with a description of why they think something was more important, or they'll do what I hope they'll do, and they'll say this one saves 10 grams, this one saves 10 megajoules on embodied energy. So I'm making an equivalent statement across these if I set up my problem properly, so they can say each megajoule is worth 1 gram of weight savings, so I'm going to pick the megajoules of savings in environmental impact as you presented the material to me. And I think really it's about thinking, taking in information, and figuring out how to respond to it. I would love to say each megajoule is worth 30 cents, and therefore just financially calculate everything. And I'd love to do that for jobs too.
But it depends on the price of oil, right?
It depends on so many factors that are coming in that you need to do that. And teaching life cycle assessment or life cycle analysis in addition to everything else, and then doing a societal version of that, is challenging. It doesn't fit in the curriculum very well. The students are demanding it, but we can't collectively seem to get it together. And I think, as you pointed out, once a student says, hey, here's the answer, and somebody says, well, wait a minute, that's not the answer under these conditions, then we have to start realizing that this problem is a wicked problem. So figuring out how to put that equation together is, getting very, very complicated. We're back to matrix math for this for sure.
I just wanted to kind of address the pill and the cheese. Our students are excited about sustainability. Absolutely. They're excited about that stuff. But when you then have to put the entire process around that, that's the pill they don't want to take, right? They don't want to have to sit down and figure out what your budget is for a particular project. They don't want to have to map those things out. So we have to kind of sneak those in. And the cheese ends up becoming the projects that they're working on. And then you can sneak in these other pieces. But you're exactly right. They're excited about the sustainability and those aspects of it, but recognizing that they need to kind of put a process around that is always the challenging part.
Here's something non-academic, but I think really important and ultimately very academic, which is the idea behind the theory of design thinking, that you have you start with a diverse in age, in economic income, and in everything. You have a group of people, maybe hired, who are there to discuss the problem. And you don't even know the problem until you've had the discussion. And then you create a prototype. And then you have all of these people really arguing and saying, no, you're full of crap, this is blah, 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 and not taking it personally so that they can service the idea. And then that happens again, make another prototype, and then do it again. With this group of people who are dedicated to the notion, the idea, and not to the grade or whatever else they might be interested in. And so I wonder if we could formulate a class around a conversation like that.
I thank you very much for wonderful insight. I mean, my question is regarding the prototyping. And sometimes, when you discuss sustainability, it comes to the policy, okay? Because it's not always the technical solutions or something. And, well, you cannot prototype sometimes those policies and solutions. I wonder how you deal with those kind of things. Like how you're going to test the ideas, without your prototype. I mean, is it clear? My question is.
I think so. You're saying it's not a thing.
Yeah, it's not a thing. Yeah, it's a policy, it's a concept, or it's a process maybe. Okay, and how you go with prototyping and testing that?
A process is a program of prototyping. I would say just because it's not a tangible thing, it's still a thing. Like I think we have to merge digital and real world. Like I have my students make portfolios, process portfolios. And it evolves all the time, but it's always in a place where we can look at it and we can say this is what's going on. And I think the same thing happens with policy. If you could have that kind of discussion during your sort of incremental growth of developing the idea, that's my hunch.
I have a slightly different take on that. So I also struggle with the term prototyping in this context. So for me, especially like a software development, prototype is something that works. Like I can run it and it spits out numbers. Whereas I've been learning from design thinking, it's like a prototype can be a business model canvas or it can be like a sketch or something like that. So it's still it's something that it's tangible and that you can demonstrate it, but it's not the high fidelity prototype. I've started using high fidelity versus low fidelity prototyping to kind of differentiate. And so what I do try to, at least to your point, because we don't have the time in the semester to go through that kind of prototype, what I would call high fidelity prototyping anyway, is to try to at least get them to attach numbers to these things. So most of these students have never even, in my case, have never filled out a business model canvas at all. And so I'll tell them, so make sure that for this to be truly sustainable and something that a business will actually take on and implement, your revenue has to be greater than your cost. And the concept that they, like, looking up the numbers and trying to make that balance, like, they've never even had to think that far. So that's how I personally try to kind of bridge that gap in something where I think of it more like a hypothesis. And so it's like, well, I've proven on paper at least that this has some potential, and then maybe if we had time or like a graduate study or something, then they could take it to the next step.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I agree with that as well. So it is kind of interesting. One of the things that we use a lot is a whole system map. So we use those a lot, and depending, you can do a whole system map for a process. So in fact, we're putting a whole system map together for the makerspace so that we understand where the pieces are that we need to prototype. And some of that prototyping is just going to be a plan. We've got these future videos that we want to put together for training. So our prototype will be to put the structure together to where those videos are going to live and are going to be accessible. So you can use that whole system map for a lot of things. And I really like that whole system map piece because it does give you that perspective. Instead of just drilling down into a specific technology, you have to step back and you have to zoom out to see the other things that are going on around your full system. So I highly encourage that. And then you can use it for process, you can use it for technologies that you're trying to develop, but it's applicable across the board.
In the beginning phase of the, like, stride one, that you have the slide there, like identifying the system problem and so forth, or you do it in the prototyping?
Well, you start, sorry, thank you. Yeah, what you do is when you get through the kind of the inspiration phase, and then you're starting to think about your ideas that can solve some of the problems that you've identified. When you start getting a little bit more focused in on the ideas and how you can cluster those around a whole system map. And then you can start looking at, okay, where are our touch points? And what are the things that we really need to test out before we bring them into our solution? That's where you can start identifying where the prototyping needs to be done. Does that help? Okay.
Let me say one last thing. That is the idea of storytelling and like metaphor and symbol, that you can have a thing and it can represent a thing. Like if you make it real, and we have a thing called showing thinking. How do you show thinking so that you can talk about it? So it's really about communication. I mean, the idea of prototype is, it can be very limitedly thought in terms of hi-fi models or whatever. I think the idea is to have something that you can look at, like a word or whatever it might be, to have something to discuss.